Hello, and welcome to this Sage 300 training video. Our topic today is going to be accounts payable invoices. Let's navigate to the invoice entry screen. We'll start by navigating to Accounts Receivable, AR Transactions, and we have two options. We can start with the invoice batch list. Here we see we do not have any open batches, so we could create a new one by pressing the New button. If we had an existing batch, we could highlight the row by clicking on it and press the Open button. Our other option is to come into Invoice Entry screen itself. Here we could navigate to the next batch using the navigation buttons. We can use the Finder to select an open batch, or since we don't have one, we can press the New button. The first thing we might want to do is give it a description. The batch date should default to the current date, but if you want to change it, you certainly can with the calendar. Our next option is to start entering a transaction. We see what our entry number is, and then we have a decision to make. Are we going to use an AR item or a GL account with a summary type of invoice? Let's start with an item and then we'll do a summary one. We'll give the invoice a description. This is an internal description. This is not customer facing. The next thing we want to do is select our customer number. I'm going to pick Mr. Ronald Black. If we want, we can use a ship to location. I'm going to pick the warehouse. Our next field here is the document type. For the moment, we'll just leave it at invoice. We have a document date and a posting date. These can be different. So we could say, hey, we need to invoice something for the end of last month, but we've already closed the prior month and we want to give it a current month posting date. That is an example of when you might want to have the two different. However, most of the time, especially with accounts receivable, your document date and your posting date are going to be one and the same. The posting date is what defines the year and period that this will be booked to in the general ledger. Our account set comes in from our customer, and that defines the receivable account that this will be going to. We do have options for job related if you are using project and job costing, or a retainage type invoice if you're doing retainage accounting. Our next field is the document number. By leaving it at the **** new ****, we will use the next number in sequence. If we want, we can enter a purchase order number, an order number, and a shipment number. Since we are creating an AR invoice, these are plain text fields. However, if you were creating invoices down in order entry and using the order entry module, when that information pushes up to accounts receivable, it will automatically fill these three fields as appropriate from the invoice that is processed in order entry. Order entry invoices are outside the scope of today's call. We have a field here for special instructions. This is a text field. You can put in whatever you feel is appropriate in your particular situation. Our next field is the Ship Via field. If you are just using accounts receivable, this is a plain text field. However, if you have the order entry module, you will have a Finder option here, and you will be able to see the various Ship Via codes that were entered down in order entry and select them here. Since I do have that open, I am just going to select an option. Now we'll get to the main part of the invoice, and that is our detail grid. I'm going to come into the grid, and I'm going to select an item. I'm going to use my Finder, and I'm going to select Office Cabinet. When I tab out of the field, it's going to pre-populate the information in the row. I could use my slide bar here to navigate left and right to see everything, or I can hit the Account Tax button and see the details here in a form view. We have, of course, our line number. We're on the very first line of this invoice, and the item number that we selected. our description. The distribution code defines what are the GL codes that are going to be used. Then we have our quantity. I'm going to change this to quantity of 5. We have our unit of measure. In this case, I only have 1 unit of measure for this item, but if I had different units of measure, I could have different prices set up. And then I have my unit price. This is what I'm going to sell each unit at to the customer. I can change this, but I'm going to leave the setting that was already set up when the item was created. Sage then, of course, does the math and says how much will the customer be charged for the total of 5 units. It's also extended out the cost. So there is a cost that was assigned to that filing cabinet in the item setup, and Sage has done the math to cost it out. It then shows me the different GL codes that it's going to use. So we're going to book $2,235 to this particular sales GL code. And then in our cost, we're going to credit the inventory and debit the cost of goods sold defined here. Remember that on our revenue account, the offset of that is going to be accounts receivable, and that's defined by the account set that's set up right there. We have an export declaration number. This is generally left alone, but if you want, you can put a value in here. You might want to then add that field onto your invoice template. Please talk to your Sage business partner if you would like to make that happen. There is also a comment field. This is a 250 character plain text field, so feel free to type in any message that you want. If you would like that comment to appear on the invoice, click on the print comment. We can say, is this discountable based on the terms code or not? If we have optional fields that we want to track, we can identify those here by clicking the optional fields button. And then the taxing information based on that particular item is going to appear down here. When I'm ready, I can hit the add button and the next number will come up in line. I can go ahead and click on that. I'm going to pick on maybe a credenza here, and we'll say also quantity 5 on these. And I'll add and close. All right, let's take a look at some of the other parts of our invoice screen. We have the overall taxes tab. This is inherited from the customer and defines what sales tax will be utilized in this particular transaction. We have a terms field here. Our terms code is also inherited from the customer and we'll pick up what date it is due based on the terms code and the order date on the invoice date on the transaction. If discounts are applicable, it will enter the discount information in here. If you want to manually provide a discount or override one of the settings, maybe your due date is on a Friday and you want it to be the next following Monday or something like that, you could go ahead and change it. We have an optional fields screen here. So again, if you have some optional or user-defined fields, you can enter those values here. The sales split. This particular customer has 2 salespersons allocated to them, with Bill receiving 80% of the commission and David receiving 20% of the commission. You can adjust these. You can maybe remove somebody by hitting the delete person, delete salesperson code, yes. And I'm going to change this to 100% because maybe Bill did all the work on this particular sales. If you are a multi-currency company, you will have a rate tab here, and you can see the exchange rate that's being utilized. This is Sample Company Limited. Its primary currency is the Canadian dollar. However, this transaction is in US dollars, so it is showing the exchange rate setup, and it's picking the last available exchange rate, which in this sample company is December 31st of 2020. Obviously, that's an old rate and probably not accurate to begin with, but it is sample information. And then we get to the total tab. So we see our document amount, $7,180. We see our taxes that have been assigned, and then our grand total. When I'm ready, I can hit the Add button and create my entry. Now, because my settings are set to auto clear, it advanced me to the next. Please note that now that we've moved back onto the transaction, our document number has now been assigned. No longer are we star, 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 new star, 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 but we are invoice number 12. All right, let's hit our plus button and go to a new entry and look at the summary type invoice. Let's begin by finding the customer we want to use. Let's go ahead and use the house doctors. Now, in this case, I don't have any ship to locations predefined. So I'm going to go use my zoom button here, and it's pulled up their primary address. But let's say they want to ship to a different address. So I'm going to change it. Okay. Now, the next thing I might want to do is, because I've selected a different ship to location, I've created a manual one, I'm going to go ahead and potentially change my taxes. Well, I picked a New York, so my only options in here are California or US that are US dollar tax group. So I'm going to leave it at the US dollar tax group. But I can come in and say, this particular case, we are not going to collect sales tax. So I've turned my tax class from taxable to a non-taxable sale. Okay, we've come back to our document here. We're going to leave it at invoice. We're going to leave our dates alone. Let's take a look at our terms code really quick. We've got a net 30, so it's calculated exactly out 30 days. Let's go ahead and change that to a 210 net 30 and provide a 2% discount. We'll come back here and see the discount amount calculated out. All right, now on our document tab, because we are summary, we need to enter a GL code. I can either enter into the revenue account field the GL code that I want, and I could find my GL codes by hitting my finder, selecting down, and I know that the accounts start in the 4000 series, so I could select a sales account. Or if I've set up distribution codes, I can use a distribution code that has already been set up in Sage. And so I'm going to select, in this case, let's go rental sales northern. So my description automatically comes in, my GL account automatically comes in, and then all I need to do is enter the dollar amount. So I'm going to say $5,000. If I hit the account tax, I can see the full details of my entry. It's a little bit different than the item number. We don't have a cost of goods sold and an inventory account being displayed here. We are just working with a revenue account. If I hit my plus button, I can get another revenue account here, and I'm going to say commercial sales, and we'll say 2,500. And add. And I'm going to go ahead and close. Now, if I come back to my taxes, I see that my tax base is the full amount here, but because I set my tax class to 2, which I know has been configured with a 0 rate, there's no taxes being applied. If I come to my terms, I can see now that my discount is being engaged. So the 2% discount with an early pay of 10 days out from now, which is St. Patrick's Day, it is on a base of $7,500, and so 2% is $150. Again, I have my optional fields. I have my sales split. I have my rates as appropriate, and I can come over and look at my totals. And it says my document total here. There's no taxes associated with that. There is a possible discount, so the expected amount that we will receive is $7,350. And when I'm good, I'm going to hit the add button. Okay, let's do another transaction here. And I'm going to do a credit memo example, and I'm going to use Dr. Dan Penn. And this time I'm going to change my document type and look at the other options in here. Of course, our most common option is going to be our invoice. However, for this example, we're going to do a credit note. So if we have to refund the customer something. We have other document types in here, but we're going to consider those outside the scope of this training call today. However, I will comment that a debit note can be thought of as a negative credit note. So if you want to adjust an invoice up, you can use a debit note, but we're going to do a credit note here. Of course, we have our same document date and posting date as before. We'll let the system assign the next document number in sequence. However, here, we're going to get our open documents, and we can select an invoice that we want to apply this to. I'm going to select this one here. I can put in a PO number, order number, shipment number, or any of these other fields. And I'm going to come in to my distribution code, and I'm going to select retail sales, Eastern, and $500. So what will happen is we'll create a credit note. We're going to reverse $500 in sales. And if applicable, we're going to apply it to this particular invoice. If it is closed, it will just apply the credit to the customer's account. If the invoice is open, it will reduce the amount due up to $500. So if this invoice has an open balance of $1,000, it will be reduced by $500 and have a remaining balance of $500. If the open amount on that invoice was only $300, it would pay off that invoice and reflect a credit on the customer's account of $200. And when I'm done, I can hit the add button. Now, we could print each invoice off one by one by printing the Print Invoice button here. I could also change this value and grab the entirety of the batch and hit print. And I get my document. These, of course, can be customized. If you have Crystal Designer, you can change them yourself, or you can work with your business partner to update the template that comes out of the box. Many people like to replace their logo with, or replace the generic logo with their own company logo. The remit to address down here is defined by the billing cycle set up on the customer. If you want to have this changed, go into the billing cycles and you can update the value there, and then all the invoices printed after that point will have the updated address. And if I cycle through, I can see my next transaction and my next transaction. Notice that the credit note says credit note down here at the bottom, whereas the invoice says invoice down here. If I change the delivery method from print destination to customer, then if I've set up email parameters within my system, it will email each of the customers based upon their delivery method. So if their delivery method and their customer setup is mail, it will print out a hard copy. If, however, they're set up to one of the three email options, customer, contact, or multiple contacts, Sage will use the appropriate email addresses and send them an email. The email message ID is a template that's set up in your accounts receivable setup, and it will apply that message to the body of the email. In order to engage that, you can just hit the print button. Looking at the rest of our screen here, we can see that we have 3 invoices and the total amount of our batch is defined right up here. When I'm done, I could hit the post button here and that will post the batch, or I could close this and come back into my invoice batch list and hit the post button here. Or if I have multiple batches, I can set them all to ready to post and hit the post all button. And now I've posted my batches. This concludes this Sage 300 training video. Thank you for watching and have a great day.